Hello, Mark. I'm very excited and grateful for this opportunity to speak to you and have you as a guest on the Naturally Innovative podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's good to see you and be on.
You inspire, empower, and encourage people across the globe to leave our home planet better than we found it. I wanted to ask you, where do you draw your energy from for this grand mission?
Well, I get asked that question quite a bit. So a lot of people expect an answer that I was struck by the climate god or some kind of lightning, or I'm a climate refugee and experienced some major traumas. And that's not the case. So it was a gradual transformation over time. So I draw it because I truly believe in the exponential function. I also believe in um, the core basis of humanity, that when we act as part of a crew member of Spaceship Earth, or as a part of a symbiotic Earth, that we harness this unbelievable, innovative, ecological phenomenon that has to do with innovation and how the way the world has always worked, that really puts us on a path of really superpowers to be beyond exponential growth to solve problems. And so it was really a gradual change where the lights went on brighter and brighter, and this kind of transformation and change of habits just really metamorphed into the way I am and how I live and act every single day. So I want to kind of just go in a little bit deeper into that, so that you understand what I mean. Um, I didn't just wake up one day or see someone or get struck by lightning and say, okay, I'm going to change my life and start being sustainable and regenerative, and really applying things, caring more about nature, being an environmentalist. It was just more and more as I did business, as I went throughout life, I thought, boy, these are bad systems. This is not working for me. This lifestyle, this world is not very conducive to how the world really works. And so I looked initially for other systems, other ways to do things, to to kind of make the world better, to leave it better than I found it. And I just wasn't seeing any help. I wasn't seeing any systems. I wasn't seeing that. So I decided to create it for myself and also to talk about it. And what that did is it started to change my habits and the way I look at the world and the way I see it. And once that light went on and it got to its full brightness, I couldn't turn it off anymore. I thought, boy, it would be a lot easier to just sit back and watch sports and enjoy my beer in the evening, and not worry about the day-to-day activities. But I just can't. There's no way that I can see the world differently. And so that's kind of how the process went. And it's very similar to the metamorphosis of, or transformation of a butterfly. Once you go in from a caterpillar to that chrysalis and then emerge out of the chrysalis into a butterfly, there's no way to go back in the chrysalis and into that gooey stage and then say, okay, I'm numb, I don't feel the world, I'm desensitized, and go back to that. Once you've opened that door, there's only really one path. And so that's kind of that. But I've also had some really beautiful mentors and experiences along the way that I don't want to negate or forget about. I was one of the first 50 people trained by Al Gore, the former vice president, and his ranch in Carthage, Tennessee. And I'm in both of his movies, The Inconvenient Truth and the Inconvenient sequel to The Inconvenient Truth. And I was trained by him as a climate leader and a speaker, and then later became a Germany and Austria country manager for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, and have been involved with them quite some time. But really, that was an opportunity and super experience to learn from such a great orator and master on, and someone who's really concerned about climate change, on how to talk about it. What I like most about him is he really empowered me to say, hey, this isn't Al Gore's talk. This isn't Al Gore's presentation. He gives you his presentation. He hands you a USB stick and says, here's all my slides. Now make it yours. You go out into the world and remove slides, add slides, use what I've taught you here and make it your own. And specifically towards Germany or to wherever you live, find out what's going around in that area of the world. If there's climate issues going on, if there's human suffering going on, and add those specifics in for your region, so the people that you talk to in those places where you're at um, can also see that there's some things going on that just don't make sense with how the world should work in the future. And so that was a great empowerment. And then the other mentor I have is William Mcdonough, or Bill Mcdonough, who started Cradle to Cradle, or
Mhm.
the circular economy with Ellen MacArthur, and done many other great things. He wrote the book Upcycling and Cradle to Cradle with Michael Braungart, who actually lives where I live, up in Hamburg, and teaches on the Leuphana University. Matter of fact, this year, I believe it's in October, I'll be teaching one of his courses to his students at Leuphana under his direction and another good friend of mine. So I'll actually go be visiting them and teaching the course in one of his classrooms. And so people like that, and there's many others that I can mention that kind of just are great people that I want to associate with, but also have mentored me and given me insight. And so when you get that knowledge and you see the world in a different way, and you can see how it could be, it should be, how it could look brighter, you realize, boy, some of the things that are going on here are just not a world that you would want to live in, and that you would want to strive to maybe leave the planet better than we found it, and kind of clean it up, and to do things. And I combine that with business, with a bigger global perspective of the world and innovation and things. And so when you do that, boy, it just adds that powerful extra shazam to the whole thing, that you're just like, wow, there's no other way. There's no better way.
Yeah, I'm nodding here because I can relate so much, and I love your example also with the butterfly and how you cannot return once you entered such a state. And I believe a lot of people right now, maybe also the viewers and listeners, started to become aware and looking around themselves, thinking there's so many things that are not going in the right direction. What can I do? And this question, I found, at least for myself, is not so easy to answer. And it's also not exactly easy to envision what the future holds, let alone agree on these scenarios. So, my question to you is, what example do you like to use to help people imagine what a future that works for everyone might look like? How do you help them see beyond these boundaries that we're facing?
Well, there's a bunch of things. So I have a very strong personal why and purpose for existing for myself, and I've had it for quite some time. I put a lot of effort and thought into just that question that you asked. What does a world that works for everyone look like for me? Not for my government, not for my parents, not for my family, not for anybody else, just for me. What does that world look like for me? Something that I can own. But also, what is my why? What is my purpose for existing? Why am I here? And what do I want to do in this world? And so I ask those things for myself. But I also I want to tell you about that, but I want to also back up a little bit and kind of set the tone on that as well. My why and my purpose is to empower billions of global citizens to live an adaptive lifestyle of health and sustainability within the safe operating spaces of our planetary boundaries. Well, you're like, wow, that's a huge why, billions of people. And I truly mean that, billions of people. Well, boy, that's as one person, that's extremely hard to reach and achieve. One key is billions of global citizens. So I believe that we're all crawled out of this primordial soup of our earth, the basic elements of in my body and your body of human beings are the basic elements of our earth, that, you know, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, calcium. Those are the basic elements, but more than 90% of our body makeup is the same makeup of that found in the minerals and periodic table of those basic elements of life that our earth is made up of. And I wasn't dropped off by this spaceship Germany or spaceship New York here on this planet. I crawled out of my mother's womb, but we all, history of humanity, crawled out of this primordial soup and evolved into these beautiful hominid species and Homo sapiens. There were, now that they're discovering, 10 other hominid species before Homo sapiens, and none of those 10 are here anymore. Homo sapiens is the only one here. And so that's a whole nother topic we can maybe ponder on at a different time. And so I truly want to reach those billions of global citizens. And the way I do that is by speaking, by writing, by making recordings, by doing podcasts, by touching individuals one by one, by doing big impact innovations for purpose that solve human suffering and global grand challenges. And in times of non-pandemic or times of maybe after pandemic, things things are pretty good. So the world is kind of saying, boy, some of these old capitalistic extractive economies or systems we were living on are just not working for us anymore. And so a lot of people are out there asking, why, what's going on, what can we do, why is my government not working for me, why is my city not working for me, why is my job or what I'm doing not working for me anymore. I'm in lockdown because of the pandemic or because of Brexit. And my home that I've created, whether it's an apartment or a house, is not set up for 24/7, not only alone, but internet and technology, or I don't have enough computers for my kids or my family. And I'm going crazy within these four walls, no matter how big it is, because the world that I've created for myself is not that comfortable. A lot of people are seeing that, asking that. A lot of people are getting sick. There's a lot of domestic violence. There's a lot of things that are going on with us emotionally. And this, I call them the inner development goals, where
Mm-hmm.
people are kind of waking up to say, oh my goodness, what is going on? How this is just not working for me. I'm scared. I'm afraid. I'm at dis-ease with things, and they're looking for other things. And there's a lot of people who have been talking about this since the 1960s, about what's going on, what would come, and how we can prepare, how we could live a different life, and how we could leave the world better than we found it. And so that's a key aspect. But what I've done personally is before the Sustainable Development Goals, there was the Millennium Development Goals. And when the Sustainable Development Goals came out, and I have to say this because you see I'm wearing my pin, my SDG pin. It was given to me by Ban Ki-moon. He took it off of his suit and pinned it on me, and it was a wonderful moment. I have a couple pictures with Ban Ki-moon as well, and that. But for the Sustainable Development Goals, I wrote the Sustainable Development Goal Manifesto. And for some people say manifesto, what's that? And it's basically like a vision or a dream of what it would look like and feel like if we achieve all of the 17 sustainable development goals, which is for me something that we really needed, because when they were originally presented to us, They were laid out very linear and lateral, kind of flat, very colorful. People didn't know who they're for. Are they for cities? Are they for countries? Are they for
Mhm.
uh, corporations? Who are these goals for, and what do we do with them? Do we, is it paint by numbers? Is it coloring thing? What do you do with them? And so I wrote the manifesto to kind of give people, uh, to 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 let people sit back and envision themselves in December 2030. After reading that, how would they feel? Would they want to live in a world that achieved all the sustainable development goals and on top of that, achieve the Paris Agreement? So those two go hand in hand. And that's really what I mean about why vision, purpose, or this is that you have to be able to visualize the future, and you have to put yourself in what that work looks like. And so the opposite or kind of negative way to look at it is you take the current models that we're living in now or that we're seeing all around the world, war in the Ukraine or Brexit or different things going on with commodity crisis, supply chain, or whatever type of models we're living in our life, and we just push them out 5 years, push them out 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Are those models still working for you, or are they just intensified? Have they gotten worse? Or you're saying, oh my goodness, another 10 years in this same job, another 10 years with this. We're now on the third pandemic. We're now on the next thing of this. And what we're doing is putting on band-aids and we're putting out fires as they occur. There's not a lot of prevention and there's not a lot of foresight for the future in the way that goes. And so that's another aspect of that. But the biggest aspect of it, and I really want to address this, and it has to do with your whole podcast theme about innovation as well. It really has to do with the fact that as an environmentalist, as a climate activist, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, most people think I'm just a hippie or a tree hugger. I'm going to go out and hug some tree or a big hippie, peace, love, well, fight the man, fight the system. I do a little bit of that, but that's really not what I do. There's three main pillars or three things that you'll find in most environmentalists, most people who deal with sustainability. And I want to kind of describe those three pillars for you. The first one is you have to know economics. You have to know all the economic models in and out. You have to be very well versed in them. And I want you to understand why. Whether you're in business or not, those economic powers or those economic models that you live or are influenced with in your life play a big role on how the future of your life goes. If
Mhm.
it's an extractive economy, if it's based off of GDP, if it's based off of a hedonistic model, if it's based off of capitalism, those are that. So you have to know the good and the bad economic models. Well, I'm a fan and a student of Herman Edward Daly. He's kind of a really unusual economist. He worked for the World Bank and wrote a departing letter as he kind of resigned and retired from the World Bank and moved into a professorship at the University of Maryland. And I studied with him ecological economics, went to some of his classes and lectures. Matter of fact, I even had him at a couple of the climate conferences, the COPs, the conferences of the parties put on by the UNFCCC, in our Climate Matters TV program that we launched, where we'd have discussions with him.
Mhm.
And a good friend of mine that passed away, Stuart Scott, he passed away 2020. Because he was fighting with cancer and also because the COVID was really rough on him and what was going on with his other fights. But we hosted a program called Climate Matters TV, and Herman Daly was on there. But I'm a big fan of all those ecological economic models that really work, and most people don't even know this. So, um, did you know that there's well over probably 21 different ecological economic models out there, other forms of steady state economics, or ecological economics that are out there in our world. And I'll tell you about a couple of them that you've probably already heard of, maybe not. Circular economics or circular
Mhm.
economy, donut economics,
Mhm.
there's shared economy, there's a platform economy, there's a regenerative economy, there's steady state economics, and I could go on. There's more and more coming out every single day. There's the planetary boundaries. But so not only do you have to know those economic models that we've been kind of doing towards insanity for decades, centuries, that don't work, but you also have to know, well, how do you replace those models? What are the models that are better? What are the economic models that are better that could replace that bad or outdated model? And so maybe when we create a better economic model, one that works for the whole world, for everyone, then that better model should actually make the older or bad model, the one that didn't work very well for us or worked in a way that was an investment against our future, so that can replace that model, because
Mhm.
we need some kind of a model or a plan or a roadmap for the future. So you have to be an economist, and you can do that at the macro or micro level. Um, but you have to know, because eventually, even in your own household or even in your own organization, you have to apply those models to see that your business or your organization or even your household is successful. What kind of model are you living has a little bit or a lot to do with those bigger models of life. And right now, in any the biggest economic powers in the world is right now is China, and so they're the ones who control most of that, and those ones like Russia as well, and Ukraine and the U.S. Those have big influence on the economic models that they use, and their economies, the better they're doing, those are the highest risk, especially in any type of conflict or any kind of problems our world is seeing. And so we need to really be aware of that. So in some respects, I say I'm an ecological economist,
Mhm.
or someone
Mhm.
who really believes in steady state economics. That's the first pillar. And so that's important to know. And if you don't know about it, you didn't learn about it in school or college or university, that's okay. It's really an open source thing. It's something that we all kind of signed up to by default. We have to deal with it one way or the other. But it's important that you maybe sit back for a couple minutes and just reflect, what models am I living? Where am I at? In my home, am I living maybe a hedonistic lifestyle? Am I living a regenerative one? Am I living a shared economy because I have a family? And then when I leave the house and go to work or do something else, am I living a very capitalistic economic model? And so some people are living two or three models at the same
Mhm.
time. Their work life or their home work balance is pulling in total different directions, which is creating chaos. So that's the first pillar that's very important. The second pillar is innovation. And I want to be more specific. It's impact innovations for purpose that solve human suffering or our global grand challenges. And that's important because if we come up with just another delivery app or a new color, or some kind of innovation, say, oh, that's very innovative, but it doesn't leave the planet better than we found it. It creates more plastic waste, it creates more resource waste, and it doesn't solve our global grand challenges. It's usually not a transformational innovation. And so with that second part, the way humanity goes from one epoch or one um, point in time is through transformations. We transform into new ages. And those are always done through impact innovations, through purpose, and through this innovations that really make the world a better place. And there's a couple things that tie to something that I said earlier, and that is this butterfly effect, right? That we
Mhm.
metamorphosize and there's no going back. Well, if in our world today, we hear a lot about projects, pilot projects, feasibility studies. We hear about challenges or competitions. We hear about um, projects or change, basically. Well, all those have a start and a stop. They go for a certain point in time. And let me tell you why those will never be a transformation. I can choose to grow, I have a beard, so if I can choose to grow my hair long and a real long beard, look like Gandalf on Lord of the Rings and that. But if I decide to say, I don't like to look like Gandalf, I'm going to shave, that's a change. So I can change. I can have a start where I decide to make that change. I can also have the time where I end that. Or if I go on a diet, I could go on a diet and say, I want to get a nice 12 pack and start exercising. But then I'm out and I see one of these wonderful German bakeries and there's some uh, pretzels and there's some Bienenstich and there's something. I'm just like, oh man, I'm getting weak. And I go and eat 10 Bienenstich and you know, 2 butter pretzels and I just broke the diet and that 12 pack's not there. And so that's change, or that's a project, or that's a test to do something different. How's a stop? A
Mhm.
transformation always goes through that metamorphosis. Once you've transformed into a new epoch, you don't get out of it until you innovate out of it, and you can never go back. So there's an aspect to that's I also say a lot, and I learned this from Al Gore, and I'm sure there's other people who said it before him. We didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. There's still plenty of stones around. I think we still use them stones for a lot of things, but we didn't leave that Stone Age because we ran out of stones. We left it because there's better ways to do things. And the same with fossil fuels and some of these old processes of governance and politics, um, that we should really think that we shouldn't use all the fossil fuels. We shouldn't use all the bad policies and governance of old documents and old models out there. We shouldn't wait until we've used up every last bit of that to
Right.
leave those ages. There are some better ways to do it. And that's where impact innovations for purpose that solve human suffering and global grand challenges come in. Since 2019, and really started in a big motion in 2015 at the launch of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, but just in the last few years since 2019, all those organizations that started implying impact innovations for purpose before the pandemic, before the economic downturn, all outperformed their conventional counterparts during an economic downturn, during the pandemic, during the Brexit, during the Trump, during the Ukraine war. They've all coming out smelling so good, performing so well. And the reason is because they switched their model. They switched their
Mm.
economic model, they switched their business model to one that is a regenerative platform systems dynamic model. And that is the new emerging model is one, the way we solve human suffering in our global grand challenges is through a systemic approach, but it's these innovations that make our world better. And even to get drilled down and be more specific, it's planetary services.
Yeah.
It's global services. What are we doing to make the world better? So there's a company in Switzerland called Climeworks that's doing carbon capturing. There's Boylant Slate's Ocean Cleanup Project. There's tons of tree planting things. There's tons of ocean cleanup things. There's tons of new food companies coming out, all doing these impact innovations for purpose to solve human suffering and our global grand challenges. That is a key fact. And so you have to know, one, what kind of innovations that lead
Mhm.
to that transformation. We want to get out of the Anthropocene and get into the symbiocene. That's
Mhm.
this symbiotic scene of a better future, and there's better narratives and ways. And the terminology from that comes from a book called Earth Emotions by Glenn Albrecht, and it's a fabulous book. I recommend you read it if anybody's out there would like to read it. So that's where this innovation comes up as a vital point. The other thing that I want to reflect back onto is really good with the vision, where it ties into innovations. Most people don't understand that the signing of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals is the world's first ever Earthshot. It's the world's first ever global moonshot. It was the first time that 192 countries came together for the first time ever in human history. It's a human historical moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And signed the Paris Agreement and signed that they would enact the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a people planet protection plan to get us to a better future by December 2030. And that was a why and a vision that was set. That purpose and that why was set there. And then we still had to fine tune and figure out all the how. How do we get from 2015 to 2030? Well, luckily, we knew the monies, we knew the innovations, we knew the things that needed to be done and worked on to get there, which is different than the moonshot for John F. Kennedy. They just set the vision. They didn't have any of that technology and innovation already made to know how they were going to get to the moon. So before the decade was out, actually in 9 years or less, they were able to invent computer powers, technologies to get people to the moon. Well, we're in a better place now. We have a lot of those innovations and those things that are already here. We just need to apply them to reach that goal. So that's where the vital part of innovation comes in. There's one last aspect to that, and I know that pillar sounds pretty big. There's a symbiosis is an ecological phenomenon that is the most fastest and powerful innovation humanity has ever seen. That is an human evolutionary innovation that has to do with all symbiont life on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That when we harness that into our lives, and I'm not being esoteric. This isn't some kind of home meditation moment. No, if we include that into our business models, in these practices, and it's very well documented, what happens is a couple things. One plus one in living systems, biology, ecology, environment, all living systems, and an organization is a living system. There's full of people and processes, and sometimes animals and other species are involved.
Mm-hmm.
In businesses and organizations, an organization is made up of an organism. That's the concept of that. And if we apply those natural systems in that symbiosis, 1 plus 1 never, ever, 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 ever equals 2. It's beyond an exponential. It's 100x, it's 200x, it's 300x. It's beyond exponential. The return of that type of collaboration, the return of thinking that way, applied with those innovations in planetary services for purpose, you've got a model that can't be beat. I would bet that model against any conventional capitalistic or extractive economy, any other model out there that harms people, robs minerals, robs finite resources. Hands down, I can blow them out of the water, off of this planet with that model of success. And here's the fabulous factor. All the employees, all the customers, the environment, they're all happy. They're like, this is the best company ever. We're doing so much good for the planet. I get paid a great wage. I feel good about myself. My home life is good. The people I work for, they're like, if I got sick, they're like, oh, stay home, take some vacation time or take some sick leave. They care about me because I'm part of an organism, an organization that really cares about me. They're not using or extracting me to just discard me when they find someone better. and they treat their customers and their consumers that way, and it's a environmental social governance structured organization. So that's enough about the second pillar, innovation. The last one is really surprising to most people, and I don't want to make it too long. I'll make it as short as possible. And the last one is about, and I say this quite a bit. I'm a sustainable futurist or a regenerative futurist, and they're like, Mark, what in the heck does that futurist, sustainable, regenerative? I thought you were a tree hugger and some hippie and that. What does the future have to do with sustainability, regeneration, environmentalism? Everything. And it goes to, I've touched upon it in a little bit in some respect. If you don't have a clear vision
Mm.
of what a world that works for everyone looks like, a clear vision of what the future in 2030, December 2030 or 2050 looks like, then who does? What model are you living? What is your model? If you don't know what your plan, your roadmap, your goal, that vision looks like, then what are you working towards? And I did an experiment on my podcast, my video podcast, and also in other video recordings that I've done. I recorded about 2,500 people or more. It might even be up to 3,500 now. I do it every day. I'm doing some kind of recording where I ask people, what does a world that works for everyone look like for them? And I've had some people have answered it more than once, some 2, 3 times. Um, um, but what I can tell you is there's less than 7 that are even kind of similar. Not one of them is similar to any other of those 2,500
Mm.
answers that I received.
Mhm.
So apparently there's more than 2,500 different ways that the world that works for everyone. Now, that could be up to debate. The other interesting fact is most people had to stop and think about it. They're like, oh, I don't know. They didn't have the answer right away, and they really had to think about it. And when I asked them again a second time, or those who even answered it 3 times, each time the answer was different. Huh. So I don't know if you're following me, but that's kind of a thing. So who is setting the model for your life? What are you living a capitalistic model for your life, or what? Who is setting your future course? Is it the United Nations? Is it the United States? Is it Russia? Is it China? Who is the captain of your ship?
Mhm.
Who is the captain of the spaceship Earth and who is the captain of that? I want you to all know that we're all crew members on this spaceship Earth. There are no passengers. So you can't just say, boy, I'm a passenger on the spaceship Earth, and whoever's guiding the ship has really fucked it up, has really messed up things. It's horrible because it's not going to the place that I want to go, this utopian or beautiful future. Well, part of it is going to be your problem too, because there are no passengers. We all are masters of our own destiny and can guide our future life. Even if it's within our own 4 walls, we can create our own economies, our own models of how we want to live that to some extent. And once we set that why and we have that purpose for existing and that why for ourselves, and we understand what we want, then we can hold those in the cities and in the countries that we lived in and say, you know what, my model of my future doesn't look like anything like yours. So one, I'm not going to vote for you.
Mhm.
Two, if I did vote for you, then I want to make sure you understand the vision of the future. I want to go in and I want to push or prod or help you to get all humanity to that future. And so that's why it's important to know the answer to that question. What does a world that works for everyone look like for you? Because we need to know so that we can work towards it. There's the last thing that I want to kind of set for you that ties this futurism there. When I was younger, I loved Star Trek. I really loved it because it showed us this future, interracial marriages. It showed a hologram room, a tricorder, a food printer, you know, printed up food and all sorts of other gadgets and technology. And it was cool. You could beam and transport yourself and be in other places. Well, that was sci-fi, but for a lot of people, that set this vision of media and movie magic that showed us maybe a possibility of a different world or a different future. And a lot of those technologies have come true today. We're using a lot of those technologies and innovations. We figured a way to get from movie magic to create them as real as possible in
Hmm.
some respects. And even some of the stuff Elon Musk is doing, even though it's crazy, I don't want to go live on Mars, but some of that stuff is pretty advanced and technical, and it seems like um, some of those visions could be closer than further away. The problem is probably about the same time since Star Trek, we haven't had um, since Star Trek kind of finished and has been gone in another direction. We really haven't had any positive new visions or media
Hmm.
of what the future would look like that is sustainable, regenerative, resilient, one that where there's no human suffering and no environmental collapse or destruction. The movies and the media that we see are Black Mirror. We have a little bit of TED Talk. They're kind of um, motivational, but there's still not this media that says, hey, here's a beautiful future and this is what it'll look like or feel like, kind of like the
Yeah.
manifesto I wrote.
Hmm.
What it is it's really this thing that says Mad Max, Waterworld, Total Recall, whatever movies, Terminator, um, they're all dystopia. They're
Hmm.
fighting over resources. They're very dystopic futures.
Hmm.
And we need people with visions of what it would look and feel like if we reach all the sustainable development goals, if we move to the next step. And that's really why futurism, or having a good vision of what the future will look like so that we can feel it, then we'll be more motivated to work for that future. And so those are three key pillars and aspects that I think are just so vital. That is probably the longest answer you've ever heard to a simple question that you've asked.
No, it's yes, it's long, but it's also so powerful. The message you're sending, the questions you ask, the audience that you're asking me that I will ponder upon is very, very powerful. And very far from tree hugging. And I want to acknowledge and thank you also for all these initiatives you mentioned in the beginning that you're pushing towards, that you are fighting for, the manifesto you wrote, and how you are bringing this back to the level of the individual, and how you call us all yeah, you said we're all in the driver's seat of this spaceship Earth. We're not passengers. We can't just lay back and watch a movie and eat popcorn, right? We
Yeah.
can all do something about it, but also this huge lever you touched upon that we have as a nation or an organization, if we start to see it as an organism, as something that can work in terms of a global service that benefits everyone. So it's a very, very powerful and beautiful message that I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard in such a rich way with so many examples. So thank you for that. It's very,
You're
very.
most welcome. Absolutely most welcome. And we are truly crew members. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that there's any reductionism, that we can enjoy a movie and popcorn just like any type of situation. You can have breaks, you can have your days
Mm,
off of work as a crew member, and you can enjoy those things. But even as children and the elderly, babies, they're crew members as well, but in a different way. They're teaching
mm,
adults and parents how to care for one another. They're teaching us how, when you're helpless or you're not in a certain way, how can we care for those crew members, or how can we care for our earth? And so you're always a crew member. And the great thing is it's not a job. Job for me means just over broke, and work is really a four-letter word. It's not a positive thing. What it is to be a crew member of Spaceship Earth is really a lifestyle. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lifestyle that follows the golden rule. Treat people and planet how you would like to be treated. And I think if we follow that golden rule and realize that we're in symbiosis with all other things in our world, then the model and the life goes much better. And so it's not work, or it's not a chore to do something good for others or for our environment. It's just it's a lifestyle, and it's actually a nice lifestyle. It's more abundant, it's more flourishing. You feel better, you're healthier, because human health, our individual health, is just a microcosmos of the world around us. So if the world around you is a desert, it's polluted, it's bad air pollution, bad ground pollution, the grounds are decertified, or that will eventually, no matter what, become a reflection on your own human health. That's when
Mm-hmm.
you as an individual will start to be sick or feel depressed, or like, I don't want to go outside anymore. There's a sandstorm. The air's so bad I have to wear a mask. That's not a very good future. And so there's no way to run or hide from climate change, because wherever we're at, the way the world around us is truly a microcosmos of our own health. So I didn't mean to derail your next question. I just think that it really ties towards that better understanding on how we view that world.
I agree. I agree. And there's so many things, so many thoughts that are racing through my mind listening to you. Um, I think I want to touch on what you said about the dystopian scenarios that a lot of people are painting. And I believe also in one of your book projects that you co-authored that will be released before the end of the year, you're touching on this. And the book's titled Global Impact of Social Innovation, Disrupting Old Models and Patterns, in which you wrote about regeneration, you wrote about new consciousness that fosters adaptation to new ecological economic models. And I was wondering, if we were given these um, desirable future images, how would we weigh in all these technological advancements you mentioned? Like you talked about Climeworks, you talked about ocean cleanup, etc. What can you elaborate maybe a little bit on this, on how this all ties into a desirable future, also new ecological economic models?
Sure, I'll try to do it the best I can. So one, I just really want to touch home that symbiosis is an ecological phenomenon and a major
Mm,
mode of evolutionary innovation that has been ignored for too long. It's been around since the 70s, and we just have ignored it. Now, social innovations that spring up from just social organizations or people whose sole purpose it is to create just societies conducive to regenerative life on Earth. Social innovations are to offer solutions to what appear to be insoluble dilemmas: poverty, global climate change, terrorism, ecological degradation, polarization of income, and loss of culture. It is not burdened with a syndrome of trying to save the world. It is trying to regenerate the world. So that is a very positive thing. That is, we're trying to use that model, the way the world has always worked, even before Homo sapiens have been here, hominids, period. The world's always worked this way. And the more we help it to naturally regenerate itself and stay within the safe operating spaces of those planetary boundaries, the better our business and organization models go, because we always have enough supply chain. We have enough resources to produce our
mhm,
products, but also to please our customers, and we let the earth regenerate itself. It is possible to do that within the safe operating spaces of our planetary boundaries. The interesting thing is July 22nd was Earth Overshoot Day. What that means is that it was the day we went beyond the limit of our finite resources, and we're kind of going into credit deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And to be more specific, to be replicable, we can all function and live a long life on 1.6 global hectares. That means that if I had 1.6 global hectares, I could probably live to 90, 100 years of age, because I'd have enough water, food, security, shelter, land to produce and have everything I needed, as long as I was a good steward and a crew member of this spaceship Earth and took good care of that. There's even ways that I could increase that. But on our Earth today, per person, we're using 2.98 global hectares per person on an average, and that's why we have this overshoot day. And just to put it in a simple term, we're 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 being wasteful. We're using more resources than we need, and those that we need, we're actually wasting. So anything that's produced in our world today in the seafood, agriculture, food and beverage industry, during the pandemic, 50% of that globally was wasted. So that means not only the finite resources, the water, the sunlight, the labor, the packaging, the transport, the marketing, on and on, not only was that wasted, but those natural resources were wasted, and it didn't even make it to someone's table to eat. We just threw it away. There's three ways that we throw away food products. The first one is we bury it in a landfill, cover it with dirt. The second one is we burn it. And the third one is we throw it in our oceans. Well, let's forget about the other two. Let's think about the first one. The first one is the worst. It's when we burn or when we bury any product in packaging or without. What it does is it aggregates, it ferments, it turns into methane. And
Mm.
methane is a greenhouse gas that's 84 times more effective at creating heat in the short term than CO2, which everybody's kind of carbon, which everybody is complaining and worried about carbon dioxide. Um, and so we've just not only wasted those finite resources, now we've created all this greenhouse gas emission on top of it. It's very ineffective, it's very inefficient, and it affects human health. It affects health and nutrition, diet, and it affects our environment. And it's coming back to beat us, well, to bite us, and that's a very bad model. And so some of the innovations that I talk about, like Climeworks, like Ocean Cleanup Project, those are planetary services, but there's a lot of food companies and car companies and computer companies that are not building things with built-in obsolescence. They're thinking about
Mm.
circular economy. They're thinking about cradle to cradle. They're thinking about things that last a long time, that also are based on a shared economy or a principle where they create something and it goes to the community and everybody can use it, because not everybody would use that product 100% of the time, every minute of the day. That many people could use it at different times. So there's things like that, so that it's not a reductionism that you don't have to miss out or not use those things, but it's a different way of creating and making products. And there's new forms of food that are emerging, like Aleph Farms, which is cellular agriculture. It's a lab-based meat that they do. It's cultivated meat that they take a non-invasive cell from a cow, and they grow it in a lab, in a bioreactor, and in 3 weeks they can produce a thin cut steak or a full piece of steak that you can eat. Well, one, there wasn't 3 years of raising, feeding, giving grass or seeds or soy or whatever they do to cows, not all the water they give to cows, and it wasn't 3 years of torture of the cow to then be taken to slaughter, and not all
Mm.
the cows and all the methane from the farts and the burps of the cow and all those other things. So that's a super innovation that has great potential, not to solve the entire industry. What they are is they're one facet or an extra tool for the toolbox that, combined in a systemic approach to many other things, can really make a big dent. And just to put it clear and make it clear, we could use 100,000 or even a million a left farm type of companies producing meat. And then we would really be making a big dent in
Mhm.
some of our food problems and things and addressing that alternate proteins, that alternate meat space, that cultivated meat, or clean meat space, that would be a good tool to reduce and help with things. But there, just like that, there are so many opportunities. I could list you, 100, because I deal a lot with impact innovations for purpose, and I do pioneers and I do scouting, looking for new companies that are trying to solve our global grand challenges and create planetary services of these new and innovative. So I come across quite a few really great, fabulous organizations, but it's not about, and I want to make that clear, it's not about those individual organizations or the brands or the products they produce. It's really about going back to what I said. We didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. It's
Mm.
about how we produce anything, whether it's a cell phone, a computer, whether it's food, whether it's a car. It's how we produce anything that will have the biggest impact on human suffering and our global grand challenges. If we do it with renewable energy, if we do it without sugars, aromas, pesticides, chemicals, fossil fuels, if we do it with battery backup, if we do it with a full water management system, we do clean and process, we do gray water recycling, we do black water recycling, we protect our precious resources, and we figure out ways to create new resources in more efficient manners. I mean, to grow from a cell, you don't hurt a cow at all. You just pluck a cell out of the hind quarter of a cow, um, and you grow it in a lab, a bioreactor, for 3 weeks, and you've got a piece of steak. That is so mind-boggling.
Mhm.
It's about how you produce. And so there's one last aspect I want to kind of tie to that, because really, ocean cleanup project, Boylan Slate, or Climeworks, just like I said with Aleph, we could use 100,000 or a million of those type of companies on our earth, around the world, everywhere, locally, and then we wouldn't just be tickling the surface of the problem and human suffering. We'd actually be making a big dent in our world, because our world is growing exponentially, good, bad, and ugly. And these slow processes, these slow ways of doing that, that's not transformative.
Mm.
Those are innovations, and they're pretty good, but it's not transformative until it's at scale, that it changes humanity, that says we're going to leave the Anthropocene, we're going to get out of this, and this is our way into a new epoch, a decade of the symbiocene, into
Mm.
a better world for our future. We're no longer making investments against our future by investing in fossil fuels, fracking, or whatever else you think about. So that is a really key, important factor. And the last thing I've got to say about that, and it's an analogy I use quite a bit, and I just want to make it clear to everyone, because it's so important to understand. If you've ever been or ever read an annual report from an organization, a company, a country, a city, a government, if you've ever read those reports, or if you've ever been at an event or had somebody get up and say, by 2024, we're going to be carbon neutral. By 2025, we're going to reduce our CO2 emissions by 60%, by 70%, by 80%. People are like, oh my gosh, did you just hear that? Microsoft's going to reduce their carbon emissions by 80% by 2025, or whatever the company is. What have they just told you? Nothing. They've told you absolutely nothing. And let me explain that for you. If you're driving down the freeway, and I'm going to have to take Germany as an example. If you're driving down the freeway and you want to go, you're on the freeway because you want to go um, towards Berlin, which is kind of, upper north, above Frankfurt. but you look up and the highway sign says Austria, or it says Bavaria. And you're like, oh, I want to go to Berlin. I don't want to go to Austria. So I'm driving in the wrong direction. So you're like, take your foot and you pull it a little bit back off of the gas or off of the pedal. And so now you're going slower in the wrong direction. And the reason I use that analogy is because if you just pull your foot back off that pedal or off of the gas, and you've went from going 100% or 100 miles an hour or kilometers per hour in the wrong direction, and you just pull your foot back and you've done it to 80%, you're only going slower in the wrong direction. But here's what throws us off. We hear these numbers of 60, 70, 80, 90% by this date, or we're going to go carbon neutral by this date. That's only going slower in the wrong direction. And it means absolutely nothing. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it's like stabbing someone slower with a knife. You're saying, I'm going to kill you, but I'm going to do it only 80% slow. So you're not going to die right away, but it'll happen eventually. Because even if the entire world were to do the right thing and to say, we're going to go 100% off of fossil fuels, we're going to change, we're going to stop it today, and we're going to stop and turn around and go in the right direction in a new future at epoch, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. And let me tell you why it doesn't matter. Because the world, the earth, our living systems don't say, hey, did you hear? All humanity, all corporations, all cities and countries, they stopped today. They stopped, and now they're going in the right direction. This is a major deal. And our earth and our environment and all those greenhouse gases and pollution in our ocean, all the plastic, all those greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, they don't just say, hey, they stopped, poof, they disappeared. All those things are still there. All that plastic still needs to be cleaned up. All those chemicals, all our ground and soil needs to be healed and restored from the chemical and deforestation and drought and all those things. All the ocean acidification needs to be restored. We still need to clean it up. And so when I say a business should leave the planet better than it found it, that's what I mean. Yeah. We shouldn't be doing the bare minimum, just extracting from environment. We should be leaving the world better than we found it. And so even if we stop, now we have to get us back into the safe operating spaces of our planetary boundaries. And that's done by having planetary services or companies that start to clean up and restore our world and provide those so that we can get rid of those pollutions and the emissions and all those things in our world to get back to a balance that we can then get into a different epoch. And so that's why it truly matters to look at those numbers different and to hear those perspectives different, because it's really easy to say, wow, did you hear that? That was such a big number. They must be doing something great. Well, they're not. They're just telling you they're still doing harm. They're still creating emissions. They're just doing it a lot slower, but there's no discussion of how they're cleaning up and all the emissions. Although in 2019, there was one organization, well, there was a couple of organizations that did this, but the one that I really liked the most that was really super at this was Microsoft. They came out and said, since we've been in business, we're going to remove all the carbon emissions and impact that we've had on this planet. So I don't know how they calculate it or how they do that, but they said for every computer, every software, everything that we've ever produced, every emission or impact we've had on this world, we're going to remove those emissions. We're going to make it right. And that's what we all need to do. We all need to do that. Every business does. That's what good crew members of Spaceship Earth does. We don't leave a legacy for our children, our grandchildren, for future generations that is dystopian, one that is hopeless. You know, we want to leave the planet better for them in the future, and that's a total different mindset and a model. But once you take it, I'll tell you what, it's so fun. It is so exciting because the biggest impact and thing that you can do as an individual is how you eat every day, how you live your own model. Once you get your own personal model right, and you find out how much better your life is going, how happy you are, how healthy you are, all those things, then it's easier to spread to your neighbors, to your
Mm-hmm.
community, to your city, to other organizations you work in. And then you realize, now I've got this symbiont organization. We're all aligned and we're all working together in cooperation and collaboration, because there's this thing that's out there that says, um, it's a misinterpretation of Darwin, where it says natural selection, survival of the fittest, severe competition, only the strong survive. And so everybody's out there. We got to compete against each other. I got to worry that Mercedes might steal my idea, and I've got to be Tesla and do something else. And and we're competing and we're fighting. That's not the way the world works. Not in
Mm.
organisms, not in business, not in country. That's not how the world works. We're not in severe competition, neoliberalism, neo-Darwinism, survival of the fittest, natural selection. That was a misunderstanding and a human condition that we've totally misunderstood. The way the world works is in symbiosis, one with another, and cooperation and collaboration. And once we realize that, we do that, that's when we go beyond this exponential function where 1 + 1 never, ever, ever equals 2. It's beyond an exponential. And then everything around you is just, it's going better. And I'm not talking esoteric or tree hugger or hippie. I'm on some kind of psychedelic medicine or drug that's like got me in this euphoric view. I'm just talking realities of how it is. And so even those companies and organizations that greenwash or fake it, usually after about a year, they're like, we were just faking it. We didn't really mean it. We're kind of greenwashing, painting some green paint on this project. Guess what? Our clients came back, our employees got so excited. There might be something to this, and they usually realize it's a better model. It's
Mm-hmm.
more successful. It resonates more. You feel better. And what it does is it reduces costs of goods sold and increases your profits, because you're not fighting or competing against. You're collaborating and working with people together. It's just a better model, not just for business, but for life, period. And so I'm sorry to hijack you, but I mean, there's so much you could say about that. You can tell that I hope that you can sense my passion and my love for the way the world truly works, and just that we can all understand it. Because the biggest thing in my life is unlearning all the things
Mm.
that I learned from others that just are absolutely wrong. That's
Yeah.
not how the world works. And every time I've done it, I've always seen suffering, or people get depressed, or job dissatisfaction, or they're like, this is miserable, and they don't have anything good to say. But the minute they flip to the way the world works, it's a lot easier. Things go easier. You feel better. There's so many great things, and it's just a better model. And so it's so important that we understand that, we realize it.
Absolutely. No, and you're not hijacking me at all. I could listen to you forever. I really love what you say, and I love this idea, this picture you're painting of the symbiocene, and also how you use this metaphor. And by the way, I agree. I think we should be much more critical at looking at these reports and seeing what's been communicated, but also how this doesn't solve some very challenging problems. You touched on our food system, so perhaps we can go into that direction, because you have your menu B book series, where you invite
Yeah.
global food reformists to challenge the status quo of our food systems, and you act as a lead author yourself. And I believe you have an upcoming book also, Menu B, People and Planet
Yeah.
Saving Food Solutions. So
Yeah.
when I read on your website, I have to say I was really shocked. But uh, you say that food production causes 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of biodiversity loss, and is also leaving more than 821 million people starving. And that really hit me, you know. And I think food is something so all encompassing that touches all of us every day in our daily life, at home, when we travel, wherever we are. So I'm wondering, and I'm very curious about your new publication. How will you change? What other perspective will you offer in your publication that we can
Great.
get used to the change that we should fight for?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make it too dystopic or something that we really need to
Mm,
fight for. And that's what I tried to mention earlier. The biggest way that we can impact our world and draw down. So there's a great book from a mentor and person I look up to. His name is Paul Hawken. He wrote a book, Drawdown and Regeneration. He's written numerous books. And matter of fact, Natural Capitalism and Growing a Business, The Ecology of Commerce, and all those are some of his books. And I'm a big, huge fan of him. But he did a great book called The Drawdown, and it was collaborative with a lot of people, a lot of experts, 200 and something plus experts and researchers around the world to kind of
mhm,
ask a question: what are the biggest impactful ways that we can draw down global warming? And it was the most comprehensive book on drawing down global warming. And there was more than 100 ways, but in the top 10, pretty much um, renewables and getting off of fossil fuels was listed in the top 10, more so on the bottom, like around 7, 8, 9, or 10 on the list. But the top half of the list had everything to do with food, global food systems, food waste, the way we produce seafood, agriculture, chemical use, the way we process foods, things like that. Empowering women, empowering girls, rethinking
mm,
refrigeration. And you're like, rethinking refrigeration? Well, rethinking refrigeration has a lot to do with food. Most of food is refrigerated. It's transported in refrigerated shipping, refrigerated trucking. In the grocery store, there's a big sections of refrigeration and freezers, keeping food so that it doesn't spoil and go bad. And then you got to think about that on a global scale, all around the world, and things like that. So the majority of those solutions are things that we do every day, and I love them. They're fun. I love to eat. I love to eat. I love good food. I love to cook. And the more you're involved and connected to that, and can enjoy it, not only is it a form of a break, but it's a beautiful way that you can contribute towards your own health and the way
mm.
you feed yourself and your family, but also how you can have a big impact on our planet, on environment, and things like that. So it's also a kind of a neat way to help draw down. And the more aware we're of that and how the big impact is, the more we can do. And so on our website, there was some big, and I have to apologize, it's actually um, 4 or 5 years old now, that data that you read from the website. It's a lot worse. Our situation is a lot worse today than it was. And just the impacts that are going on from the Ukraine war
Mm,
are impacting us around the world. About a month ago, I walked into, I was at a barber. I was going to the barber, which I need as I'm a hairy guy. I was going to the barber, but before I wanted to grab some of that great German bread I talked about, and it's a very artisan company, and does this really nice artistic bread and really good rise and heavy artisan bread. And I walked in there, and it was in the morning time, and I was like, you guys are already sold out for today? It was, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. And the lady says, yeah, no, we've been this way for weeks. And we're actually thinking about redoing our business model. We've been sold out for weeks. We can't get any deliveries of grains and wheat and
mm,
flour and
mm,
rye and all the things that we need to make from bread. And the majority of our products came from the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And this whole Ukraine thing has affected our supply chain and finding others, and they're competing with numerous other bakeries and other people producing bread in different ways to do that. And the same with yogurt companies, the same with other things. I'm seeing that all there, that there's no more there. And part of that is a different problem that the book addresses. What we've done is we've turned food into a commodity that we trade on an exchange. When you turn food into a commodity or anything into a commodity, what you've done is you've not only cheapened that food, but you've cheapened life.
Mm.
And if you turn something like that into a commodity, and that's what I want us to get away from, is putting food into a commodity, because it's a basic resource and a need. You're cheapening and trading that product as an investment between countries and cities, and there's this price fluctuation which is very volatile, but there's a downstream effect of that, that those employees who are producing those products, you're cheapening their work. Somehow someone has to pay the price of those products. And so if it costs them, you know, let's say it costs them $1.20 to produce a bushel of bananas, with all the water, the harvest, the labor, the packaging, the transport. And then in the grocery store, we buy a bushel of bananas for 16 cents.
Mm. Mm.
How is that possible? How is that the true cost? How is that the total environmental cost as percentage of EBITDA? And so what you've done is not only you've made that a commodity, and however the system is messed up, someone has to pay, and usually not only people have to pay the price of that cost because of human health or bad working conditions, but our environment pays the cost as well, because we're stealing those natural resources and we're cheapening the way we produce those products. And somewhere there's got to be, on a finite planet, some corners cut. And that's a bad model that eventually has a limit to growth and comes back to bite us. And we've seen it since the pandemic, and during this Ukraine war. We've seen a lot of those things where it's really affecting us all over the world, and we don't have resilience anymore. A lot of these systems are breaking down. So the book is called Menu B. There is no planet B. There is no other planet. I don't even think Mars or whatever Elon's working on is our planet B option. But there is a menu B. There's a
Mhm.
different way to get food away from being a commodity. There's a different way of doing agriculture, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, looking in regenerative organics, looking at different methods. There's looking at different ways of producing, using alternate proteins like mycelium and fungus and solar foods and precision fermentation for new types of cheeses and milks, using cellular agriculture for meats, and
Mhm.
that a lot of things happening in Indonesia and Singapore and Asia around those, everything from seafood to chicken to steaks, and that is going on. So there's a lot of really positive things, and all of those organizations are really concerned about sustainability, using renewable energy, using less water, using less land, using less resources, to do it in a more efficient manner, to kind of reel in how we produce that food. And I spoke about this earlier, that 50% of everything that we produce in food is wasted. So this book is Regeneration: Global Food Systems Reformation. That's really what it's about. But it has 57 plus contributors,
Mhm.
greats. I'm talking the best of the best people in the world write and contribute in this book. It is absolutely stunning. It's amazing. It's beyond comparison. Um, the co-presidents of the Club of Rome who are very concerned about food and economics, wrote a beautiful section. Carol Steele, who wrote two wonderful books, um, Hungry City and Satopia, she writes in it. She's a good friend of mine. Maria Rodell, who is the granddaughter of the original Rodell Institute, her grandfather and father started organic movement in the United States, started the Rodell Institute, um, and did all sorts of beautiful things around the organic movement, about the regenerative movement, how we can do agriculture in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, then there's people in there talk about sustainable development goals and and food and how it ties together, how the main thing of all 17 sustainable development goals are tied to food, and 11 of them are tied intensively to food.
Mhm.
Then there's Alan Savory, who does holistic land management. There's a lot of chefs and food scientists in there, and I could go on and on of all the people. Doug Evans, Diane Hatz is in there. Um, Brent Locken from the World uh, Wild Fund, which is to be the WWF. He's the chief food scientist. Kim Pullman, Paul Pullman's wife, who used to be the CEO of Unilever. Kim Pullman has a company called Reboot the Future. She's very concerned about food and writes a big section. The president of Food Tank and the reward recipient of the Julia Childs Award, Danielle Nienberg of Food Tank, writes in there. My friend, the chef Mark Brand, writes in it. Sarah Reversi of the Future Food Institute writes in it. Eve Thoreau Paul, on and on. Like I said, 57 of the world's best and brightest minds have written about food and how it ties to our everyday life, how it's creating huge, enormous suffering. One of my other mentors who kind of give me this systems view of life perspective, Dr. Fritzhof Capra, writes a section in it.
Mhm.
He's not only my professor, mentor, been on my podcast. He wrote a section in my book. Um, he's concerned about food, and he gives his views and how it ties into system science and complexity theory and into solving a lot of the problems in our world. Another good friend of mine, Jeremy Lent, who wrote the best book I've ever read in my entire life. It's called The Web of Meaning by Jeremy Lent. The Web of Meaning by Jeremy Lent. And it's the best book I've ever read in my entire life. He's a fabulous guy, but he wrote a section in the book, and it talks about the big questions that we ask ourselves. What does a world that works for everyone look like? How important are food systems? What do we need to do in that respect as someone who is just an everyday food consumer that is not a scientist or expert, but knows the bigger picture of the whys and how our world functions and how symbiosis and the things we've talked about here are all tied to food.
Mhm.
When we break down anything we've talked about today, it all ties down to the basic infrastructures of our world, which are breathing, food, water, security, shelter. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, those bottom two layers, they're all to do with us. And that's exactly what the SDGs are. That's exactly what food and how we produce it are. That is really the basics that we need to get right on this world. And it's not. It's not what we've been doing. We've been turning them into commodity, been exploiting them, been doing some horrible things, and we really need to get it right. We need to get humanity on the right side of history and get out of food as a commodity. And that's what the book's about. It's a big A4 size book, about
Mhm.
420 pages. It's a nightmare to get it all compiled and into something that's a great read. But it's something that is really going to be super for the world to have and to look at. And hopefully it will just spark more knowledge and awareness and people out there to kind of say, hey, okay, I'm looking at the world in a different way. This is how I've never seen it before. I didn't make the connection how important it is. And yeah.
Yes, yes, I hope so too. I mean, it sounds like an amazing project, and also coming back to what you said about unlearning how things have been working so far, or what we've been told. So I think when it comes to food, we all have to unlearn or relearn something.
Yeah, and
Um,
I stole that, That's not anything new. No, I didn't steal it. It comes from a book called, well, it comes from a man, R. Buckminster Fuller. He
mm.
said he spent most of his life unlearning what he learned because it was wrong. And
Mm.
he actually, funny enough, wrote this beautiful book. It's called The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth by R. Buckminster Fuller. And it kind of succinctly brings us back to where we almost started. On the inside of this book, on the inside cover, at the very top is his why. This book was written in 1968. 1968, and the guy wrote his why right in the beginning of it. I want to read it to you all now. He said, "My why is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone." R. Buckminster Fuller. In the book, The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. The guy is absolutely amazing, and you have to think about it. Um, Not only did he tell us his why, but he just set the why for all humanity in some respects. Because I love that why. I'd love a world that worked for us all, for everybody. So
Mm. Yes, me too. Thank you for sharing this. This is very nice and mind blowing if you think about 1968. That's a long time before I was born.
yeah, yeah,
um, Maybe for one of my last questions, because I know you're about to embark on a tour through Asia.
yeah.
I was wondering what else awaits you in your near future.
Well, when you work for international organizations like I do and speak or attend as a delegate, a lot of those things you can count on. So that's a nice thing. Every year there's at least 3 climate conferences that I go to, or UN events that I go to. So I always go to the conference of the parties. That's what when people say COP 21, where the
Mm,
Paris Agreement was signed, or the one that's going to happen this year is called COP 27. That's in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt.
Egypt,
I'll
yeah.
be there. Yeah, I'll be there for about 2.5 weeks. So I'll be there. It goes from November 7th, I think, until the 18th, but I'll be there a
Hmm.
little bit longer before and after. I'll be there for that entire time. So that is always, it's usually around November, December. During the COVID, they didn't have it for a while, obviously. But the last one was COP 26 in Glasgow. The one before was COP 25 in Madrid. And so they're big events. They're where we discuss about where we're going and what's happening, and what we need to do and set that vision. So I'm always at those. And then usually in the beginning of the year, although also the pandemic has disrupted this, is the World Economic Forum in Davos usually has their meetings between January and February in Davos. And this year was actually in May. It was one of the summer
Mm.
events, the annual meeting. And I was there. Although every time, last 3 times, 4 times that I've been there, it says I'm never going to go again. It's because it's so frustrating. But then there's also some very good opportunities and things that come out of it. I can tell all the listeners who are conspiracy theory or skeptics or whatever, I don't go to those events to support or promote those people who maybe might want to derail humanity or not have our best interests at mind. I'm
Mm.
there to everything that we've talked about here today on the podcast to make sure those people, good, bad, and ugly, know that I'm around, and I'm not going to let them bullshit us. I'm not going to let them tell us um, some stories or give us some big percentages, I want to make sure to hold their feet to the fire to get at the very least to my why, so that they'll start pushing my why, which is hopefully in alignment with Buckminster Fuller's why, that will
Mhm.
get us all to a better future. And I would be glad to represent you. I would be glad to see you there as well, to make sure, say, you know what, this future you guys are talking about, it's not the future that I want. I would like to see us go get off of fossil fuels or get to a better world. So I'm there to make sure that they know I'm breathing down their neck to get us in the right direction, to put us in the right direction, because I'm very skeptical to let other people uh, decide what the plan in the future is for me, especially if I don't know what that looks like, if that model's not clear, defined, and distinct. And none of them, from the United Kingdom to the USA to Russia to whatever's going on anywhere, none of them are distinct enough for me to really do, except for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement. I really can align and go with that. I think that would get us not to a perfect future, but it would give us a foundation to springboard off onto. And then the other thing I just want people to know, I kind of tickled upon it. Before the Sustainable Development Goals was the Millennium Development Goals.
Mhm.
Well, we've got about 7 years left, maybe 8 years, 7 and a few months, until we need December 2030 to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. That's not a lot of time. We've wasted a lot of time since it started in 2015. But I just want to put something into your mind. There are already goals after the Sustainable Development Goals. And
Mm.
they're called resilience frontiers, or could be called the resilience development goals. And I started the process with the United Nations in 2019 in Songdo, Korea. Ban Ki-moon was there. Christina Figueres was there. Many delegates of the UN were there, where we actually started the next iteration. After we reach sustainable development, we need resilience in our world, so that when we have climate catastrophes or problems occur, that the very next day, the very next hours, we have infrastructure, food, water, shelter. We have resilience to storm these hard times coming in our future, because politicians and delegates and people are not acting fast enough keeping up with our world. And so that's important to know. And so that's kind of what I do at these other events. I'll be speaking at Tech Sauce in Thailand and Bangkok to 20,000 people live. Um, that's a big event that I'm doing. Then there's the New York Climate Week. There's the New York Agriculture Week in New York. Then there's Philippines, Vietnam, and China. There's events going on there. China's a little bit iffy. Vietnam's a little bit iffy as well with
Mhm.
COVID. Still, they have quarantine, so some of
Mhm.
those events might fall away. And Botswana, there's a Resilience Frontiers thing going on, which is the next iteration, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
coming from 2030 to 2050. In Botswana, they're going to have a little get together workshop meeting to discuss the 8 pathways and work on there. So there's always something going on, always a book to write, always an article or podcast to do. So I stay pretty busy, but I just
For sure.
absolutely love it, because it's really it's hopeful. The more people are talking about how we can move to a better future, the more exciting it is, because there's hope and
Mhm.
optimism for that future,
Yes.
because you can take part of it.
Absolutely. This conversation with you has given me both of that, and your enthusiasm is contagious. You know that. So I will link everything, the references you mentioned, the books you mentioned, in the show notes for sure. But is there a way that you say how people can best connect with you or follow your work that you will do at COP27 and at all the other events? Where would the best platform be for that if people want to follow
Yeah,
your
there's
journey?
pretty much, it's up to them. I'm almost on all platforms that anybody could imagine to be on, not really by choice, but just to make it easy for people to, whatever medium they use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually there. I'll have to tell you, I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but I'm even there. So I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Hmm.
I'm even have a small profile on TikTok, although I still haven't conquered that medium. LinkedIn, and then I have a website, and I think that's probably the best bet to find out some of my events and where I'm going. The website is markbuckley.earth.
Hmm.
And you can find a lot of other cross links there. You can find my LinkedIn tree.
Hmm.
If you want to hear other podcasts like this, I have a podcast that's called Inside Ideas. It's by Innovators Magazine and 1.5 Media, which is a media company I'm affiliated with as editor at large. And you're also welcome to look there. I've interviewed about 165 authors and people we've talked about today and people in
Hmm.
my books that are just game changers. They want to get humanity on the right side of history. So that's also a good place to go and to listen to this, and definitely to go to your podcast, because hopefully you'll put one or two links underneath your podcast, and then they can just
For
click on
sure.
that and it'll take them into wherever. And it's Mark with a C, MarcBuckley.earth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. It was a real honor and a pleasure to talk to you. And I wish we had more time, but there's so many important things you are taking care of for us all. So I want to thank you for this and for all these insights you shared.
Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.